There are always a ton of moving pieces in intercollegiate athletics, and never more so than right now is that the case. It's a great chance to bring in a longtime, terrific person covering the sport and friend, now working for SI.com. Pat Forde joins us for a few minutes of some perspective. And Pat, I want to start with the topic that has been front and center the last couple of weeks, I should say, and those are the protests after the death of George Floyd and others. And college football coaches, I think, have found themselves in a very interesting lane here, where they have been, in essence, quiet early on, but now as they've become more vocal, sometimes that opens them up to criticism. This is an interesting lane to find for the college football coaches in dealing with their players first and then their messaging as a university overall.
It sure is, Mike. I mean, as a whole, college football coaches are pretty cautious individuals, not really ones to jump out on a social issue limb per se. But I think the times have somewhat demanded it, given the racial backgrounds of the players that they work with and the ages that they work with, and the fact that football coaches like to present themselves as molders of young men. Well, this is a life molding situation for young people and for older people, really, in the United States right now. So I think they have been put in positions some of them aren't that comfortable with, and we can see it and we can tell. And then some are more comfortable with it. But I think it's important that, given who they are and their stature on campus and who they work with, that they get out and make their voices and their feelings heard. And hopefully they're sincere and legitimate voices and feelings.
And Pat, it's a changing time in every walk of life for people finding a voice. And I think of all the stories and anecdotes of the last few days, Marvin Wilson, the captain for Florida State football, he struck me the most because he really spoke up and said, no, our coach has not been doing what he said he's been doing necessarily in terms of dealing with us and this issue. And I don't know if you get a college football captain to have a voice like that 10, 15 years ago, yet he spoke up and was pretty honest about it and got Florida State to respond in kind here.
Absolutely. That was very significant because it wasn't a former player. It's not somebody in the NFL with money and clout. This is a guy that's on the team right now. As you said, a respected member of the team captain, and he called out Mike Norvell. And there's one thing that I think if you are a coach in this day and age, you can't fake it with your players or with the public about who you say you are versus who you really are. You better be pretty authentic. You better be in touch with your locker room. You better be in touch with what's going on with those guys and be able to present an honest portrayal of who you are and what's happening. Because otherwise, players are not afraid and shouldn't be afraid to speak up and say, no, this is how it really is at our school.
And think about the Iowa situation, Pat. We always talk about how the strength and conditioning coach is usually the most important hire for a head coach because that strength and conditioning coach spends all the time that football coaches aren't allowed to be with the players and is around them and has a great little pulse of the entire team. And Iowa's coach, Kirk Ferentz, had to make a very significant move with Chris Doyle, who's been a long time as well-compensated strength and conditioning coach as there is out there because of past players and some of the things they said regarding their treatment. That's something that may not have happened if the environment hadn't changed so significantly.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're talking about a guy who's been at Iowa as long as Kirk Ferentz has been there. And Kirk Ferentz is the longest tenured head football coach in the country, so 22 years. And he had given a lot of authority and a lot of trust to Chris Doyle, and now that has been absolutely called on the carpet by a lot of players, and it's something that they have to address, I think, in a really forthright manner. And here's the thing, you look at Kirk Ferentz is one of the most respected guys in college football, and for a lot of good reasons. Mm-hmm. He's been an overachieving coach. He's put a lot of guys in the NFL at a place that doesn't necessarily have that natural recruiting ground and everything. But you wonder if too much of the same, of status quo there, is worked against Iowa to a degree. Too many of the same guys doing the same things in the same jobs for too long, and you lose touch with your locker room. You lose touch with where the younger generation may be. Kirk Ferentz's son is on the coaching staff. Norm Parker, the defensive coordinator, his son is on the coaching staff. Most of the support staff is overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly people that came up through the Iowa system. That's not to say it's all bad. But sometimes outside ideas, outside voices can be really important to get a fresh look at yourself, self-scout, so to speak, your program culture, and maybe say, hey, we need to do some things differently.
Lastly, I want to hit the COVID-19 impact on intercollegiate athletics. We're seeing reports of teams coming back, a couple of players testing positive. So the screening, if you will, is starting to work, these things that are put in place. But this is going to be a very long summer and fall, not just for college football, all college sports, all higher education, period. Pat, what are you hearing about the internal conversations on, yes, we'll have a football season, or I'm not really sure if we're going to have a football season just yet?
Boy, everybody is still right now full speed ahead to a football season of some sort. We are going to play, I believe, but how many fans in the stands, we don't know. And this is going to be very much an incremental process, Mike, where what we know on June 7th is good, but what we know on July 1st and July 7th is going to matter a lot more than what we know today. Because things keep changing. The virus changes. We're seeing right now surges in case numbers in Florida, Texas, California, the three most populous states in the United States. Surging case numbers doesn't necessarily mean surging deaths, but it could. Surging hospitalizations certainly would be a concern. And if you're sitting there as the president of a university and saying, boy, there's more and more cases of these things happening. Memorial weekend, people got out and about. There have been a lot of street protests all over the country. People have been out and about in close proximity. What kind of effect is that going to have on our demographics and our numbers from a health standpoint going forward? I think by the 1st of July, we'll see if there's been a big spike corresponding to that. And I think that will influence what universities are able to do in terms of bringing back students and in terms of keeping football players and other athletes on campus and keeping things going toward a Labor Day weekend start. So still a lot of moving parts out there, but I think the confidence is there. But with new data coming in this next few weeks, I think it's going to be really important and will influence what happens.
And Pat knows it's not just college football. Pat's a parent of a terrific student athlete in one of the Olympic sports. So there's a huge domino effect for what happens with football for the other sports. I got to squeeze this in and just have limited time. The FBI investigation into college basketball, they got a bunch of headlines, has now had an NCAA impact with a significant hit on Oklahoma State, years probation, multiple scholarships lost down the line. Do you think this is the beginning of a set of significant things we're going to see the NCAA do regarding that FBI investigation?
I think it could happen. Yeah. That was pretty significant for a school that some people forgot had even been charged because of all the other ones. And because this will look like a relatively minor case for Oklahoma State to get a one-year postseason ban. If you're one of the 11 other schools that have been involved in this, you're sitting there saying, uh-oh, what about us? Because the NCAA now has been applying a very simple but strict matrix for penalties. And basically, if you've got a level 1 violation charge against you, you are subject to a postseason ban, possibly multiple years. Right. So there's a lot of other schools that watch that, and I think probably came away a little bit nervous about what's going to happen with their case.
Ton of information. Nobody better to unpack it for us than Pat Forde, SI.com. Pat, good to catch up. Stay safe. We'll talk soon.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.